Thank you, Santoshji. Namaste, good evening, and welcome back to this second session on local internet content, prospect challenges, and way ahead. I have a wonderful panel here with me to talk about these issues. So, just to talk about this session, we will have around an hour or so, and since we are a little behind the schedule already, we will try to have the maximum possible of 1 hour in this session. We will be talking about the critical issues of local internet content and possibilities, prospects, the crux and the challenge. Well, as you must have already seen in the brochure that has already been come to you, we are trying to address four issues, four leading questions. How invest resources in wide spectrum of local initiatives to create and transport local content, how to work with existing content market, host platforms, and intermediaries to exchange and deliver community-oriented content, how to provide incentives for local content creation, and how to strengthen the collaboration capacities of organizations working with both global and local content development. As we are aware, in case of Nepal, the demographics of Nepal is below the age of 15, we have 34%, and between the age of 15 to 59, we have 54% of the population. Well, as already shared in our previous presentation, we have around 4,000 BDCs, 30,000 schools. In case of cctlv.np domain, we have around 30,000 domain names. To an expectation, half of them is hosted in Nepal, which, well, it's difficult to definitely verify, but that's what it is. Well, looking at the literacy, Nepal has 65% of literacy, which has rose from 54% in 2001. For male, it's 75, and for female, it's 57. Talking about internet, Nepal entered, or the first services that we see in case of Nepal, that is perceived, it's from the first website that came to our attention is basically Kathmandu Post, which is supposed to be the first in Asia, which was started in September 1st, 1995. The first internet presence that we learn is Nepal Digest, which is a mailing list started somewhere in 1992. Talking about Nepal again, 7% of the household has computer. This is according to the 2011 census. 26.1% of users in Nepal has access to internet. That is the data from 2030 August from NTA. Well, pretty on another note, we say that 7 to 8% has trustworthy access. That's what the figure says. Why? Well, in 2010 we have 3.69% of users. In 2011 we have 10.89%. In 2012 we have around 18%, and in 2013 we have around 26% of internet users. But as we can see from the data, more than 75% of these users come from mobile internet. To talk about data, well, dial-up has 15,000, wireless optical has 56,000, cable has 18,000, ADSL has 1,14,000, WiMAX has 2,500, CDMA 2,32,000, and GPRS, that is 64 lakhs. So that's what constitutes the overall architecture. Well, I have wonderful panel here, and we have Binay Bohara sir, who is president of AIS and a past chairman of NBIX, executive director for Violet, and will be sharing about infrastructure and about the local content, local internet content. Second, we have Ravi Karmacharya. He is ED for Open Learning Exchange, MIT graduate and a corporate entrepreneurship who has converted to social entrepreneurship. Then we have Osama Manzar from Digital Empowerment Foundation, a member of IGF Working Group and a social entrepreneur. Then we have Allan, a veteran IT entrepreneur in Nepal, CEO of Unlimited Technologies, member secretary of Nepal Language IT, and a corporate organization which has been engaging in enabling technology for social development. And finally, we have Manohar Bhattarai sir, past vice chancellor of High Level Commission of IT, a proponent of rural telecentres in Nepal, and one of the initiators and think person behind IT policy in Nepal. Well, before moving on to the sessions, I would just like to share some of the ground rules that we would like to have. We have some question and answer sheets in your table, and if you have any particular question, please fill it up. I guess Vikram is there, and you can just pass it on to me so that we can put up those questions to our panelists. On top of that, we will have few face-to-face questions also in the end if we have some time remaining for. So, each panelist, how we are trying to take up this session is we will have rounds and rounds of session going through each panel and impromptu question from you as well as some impromptu question which I am preparing myself. So that's there. But basically, we'll have the first round where I will request all the panelists to limit themselves within 3 minutes and talk about maybe the five most prominent things that they would like to talk from their own areas, expertise, niche area of learning, which would enable local internet content in case of Nepal. Then we'll move on to other questions. So, well, if we have any in between any questions, please write it up and please pass it on to Vikram so that we can have it here. So moving on to the panelists, I would request Binay sir, first of all. Binay sir, what are the 5 prominent things that you would like to talk? Well, there could be many, but why 5? So that we have some time limitation as well as our audience could truly remember these 5 things that we want to talk about from the perspective of internet infrastructure in case of Nepal, which is necessary, which is very important for enabling local internet content in case of Nepal.
If you look at the internet usage pattern here in Nepal right now, 95% of the content that comes, the bytes that gets transmitted is international. I think around 5% is local. And we do have an exchange here called Nepal Internet Exchange. And Nepal Internet Exchange, all the ISPs appear there in the exchange, local exchange. It's only in Kathmandu right now. Need to go regional with that. So one important thing which Hempal mentions, I think, is the local exchange and trying to generate local content that goes through the local. Why only 5%? I'm sure there's a lot of content out there, a lot of websites out there, Nepali websites, Nepali content. But unfortunately, most of these are hosted outside of the country. The main reason being the readiness here of the infrastructure was a challenge. So that's one area which we will be talking as we go along. And the other, I think, most important thing we need to discuss is our own domain. We have a .np domain, and it's free. So .np domain, anyone can register their own domain, free of cost, no charges. But then we've not seen many domains being registered under .np. Because why I say .np is important is it gives sort of legitimacy, because you own, instead of .com, which could be hosted anywhere, .np would be registered here in Nepal, would be a legitimate site, would be protected by the laws, like we have the cyber law here, cyber law protects it. So .np, if we can promote that, maybe local content can come in there, and local transactions can happen there. So let's remember this also, .np is also important. And the other thing that's important is building the infrastructure, because most of it is outside, so why not here? That is happening now. We see data centers coming up now. Data centers, we have 16 hours of power coverage to speed, so let's not forget it's a challenge. But then data centers do play a role, and we have one in Kathmandu, in Bohara, coming up, and we have one in Ravi, which I So data centers are coming up here. We need to give confidence to local entrepreneurs, anybody hosting the sites, to go local. It's there, it's quality, uptime, the guarantees are there, SLAs are there. So that is something that we should also look into. And the other things, obviously, the most important thing actually is connectivity, which we should not forget. Right now, what is the percentage of connections? Numbers were thrown, 10%, 11%. Real broadband, some say it's just 3%. So it over somewhere around 3 to 10%. And I think around 7% of that, 10% or 11% would be mobile. Mobile means 3G. 3G connectivity is still very flaky, not very prevalent, it's not pervasive, it's not out there everywhere. It's expensive. So, and it's not in everybody's hand. I mean, the technology is still expensive. The handsets probably are expensive, not very accessible to everyone. So that is another area. So these are the kind of things we need to discuss. So,
thank you, Minister. I guess we have already reached a limit of time of 10 and 3 minutes as well. So moving on to Ravi. So we're coming from a social perspective, coming from a social enterprise perspective, who have been working on creating local content for education, for other issues. What are the 5 prominent things that you would like to share here?
Thank you, Hempal. First of all, I'd like to really express my gratitude to AIS for shedding some light on the need for local digital content. This is something that we have been talking about for a long time. And back in 2007, I clearly remember when we started over in Nepal. Manohar, as you may all know, he told me, Ravi, I've actually been able to get internet connectivity to really remote villages in Nepal. But the people there are asking me, what are we going to do with this internet connection? What is it that we're going to look at? Where is the content? So everybody, the schools were looking for content, the community members were looking for content. Except for a few, we hear about a lot of anecdotes about somebody selling buffaloes on the internet and all of that. So besides that, I don't think the use of internet has been pervasive enough to benefit or to make clear an impact in economic growth, education, health sector. So like my friend and colleague Binay said, infrastructure is one of the biggest challenges that we face. We've been working primarily in education, but then we've also been connecting schools. And previous keynote speakers have spoken about the last mile connectivity. That is the critical part. How do we connect that? So infrastructure, and then the business model. So all in Nepal, with help from Nepal Wireless Project, we were successful in connecting a number of schools in really remote areas like Joti, and Dura. But to sustain that was a big difficulty. We had to find a business model through local entrepreneurs who can set up a business. And then the whole idea is who's going to pay. Many of the schools are really poor out there and not able to afford even to pay the maintenance fee. So I think one of the keynote speakers, I believe, Venki actually talked about continuous business. That is very true. But then we also look at the disparity that is actually rising currently with the use of technology worldwide. We still have millions of students and millions of people without connectivity who have been left behind. And that's one of the reasons that we started a social venture, that we said that we need to do something to address that need and not just cater to the mass that can pay for it. So business model, and the third is awareness among customers. What is possible? Since this is something that we work with teachers who've never used computers before, now to show them and to make them aware what are the possibilities and get them to a mode of it's a different kind of a shift in paradigm for them to actually teach in a different way, to explore and become lifelong learners. And relevant content, fourth thing, very important. I remember reading this a few years back about somebody, an entrepreneur, or let's say someone, a village I believe in Kenya, who actually jerry-rigged a car battery so that the family could watch television. So nobody wanted to teach him. He actually went through this. And why is he doing it? Because he wants to watch television. Because there's something that he finds interesting. That's something he probably can learn from. So that has to be addressed. So what is it? We talk about content. What is the content that's actually needed? What is the thing that people want? So we have to address that. And finally, the most important thing is that we need to discuss the mindset. Internet connectivity has opened up the world to the users, but has it opened up our minds? I think my colleague earlier also touched upon that topic. Subir actually talked about changing the mindset of sharing, of opening up. We still have government offices who refuse to share the information that is our rights. They still hide it. And then in many government institutions, they feel that information is power. But the way they think is information is power as long as I can keep it, so I have the power. So we need to get into a mode of sharing that. The Curriculum Development Center under the Ministry of Education still refuses to put the books online. This is a country where the ministry every year faces problems delivering books, yet they do not want to put it online. So these are the changes in mindset that need to take place.
Thanks, Ravi, and we will come back to some of these questions. Definitely, the sustainable business model, relevant content, and opening of the mind. Next, we move on to Osama. Osama, one of the social entrepreneurs who brings his rich experiences from South Asia and the region. So, Osama, what are the 5 prominent things that you would like to talk about when it comes to enabling rich local internet content, and particularly how it could be related to Nepal?
Okay, I have 4 or 5 points. One is that we should invest in identifying human content, in the sense that those individuals who are self-driven, passionate, but nobody knows them, who are at the grassroots level, to have a change makers, because that is extremely important. It cannot be top down. We need to find out such people in the remote areas, and they are everywhere. We need to find out to motivate them and take them the mission that we all want to achieve. So one is human infrastructure, change makers who are self-driven and passionate. The second thing, we should immediately work on how to propagate mobile usage as much as possible. You have 78% mobile penetration, as Allan just told me. And I'm sure it is not an absolute number. It must be the number of SIM cards that you must have sold. If you go into the absolute number, in terms of absolute number of users, it may be 40% or at the most 40 to 50%. That means you have 50% of your country, and same here in India. India has more than 60% non-mobile users, so that means they are not using any other medium. So it is very important, how do you start creating a second-hand market, third-hand market, to make the mobile reach in the hands of the people who are orally enabled but they need a device. The third thing is, how do you integrate mobile and radio together? Because both are there in numbers in Nepal, both are oral, and both use airwaves, and one is far distant connector and one is a local distant connector. So one will connect in 50 kilometers or maybe 100 kilometers, 20, 30 kilometers, but one will connect across the nation. How do you use the interactivity of mobile and the transmission in the air by the radio? Because radio, which is one way, becomes interactive as soon as it starts talking on mobile. And mobile is also FM listener. You don't need to buy a second device. So how do you make the marriage of oral content through radio and mobile and make it more interactive and participative? The fourth is social media. How do we, because it is extremely interactive, and social media is a natural way of generating local content. Anywhere in the world, social media is full of local content, because every user produces local content, their family photos, whatever they do, they produce. If you ask a person to create a website, it takes a longer time. You ask them to post on a website, on Facebook or Twitter or anything, it's very quick. So how do we make social media as a driving force to create local content, and maybe having another technology tool to drive from there to content? The fourth, final thing is that how do you create citizen journalist network? Because everybody who has a mobile is a journalist, and a producer of content. How do you use a single citizen into producing content and aggregating them and creating local content? And that will also make your journalism much more fruitful. Thank you.
Thanks, Osama. And moving on to LNG, who have been one of the person who is facilitating one of the largest social networking sites in Nepal. So I guess some of the ideas or issues or things to be done, action item which Osama has already mentioned, maybe we can move on to Allan and have his views also on this, along with the 5 prominent things that we need to take on.
I think first is, like Binay talked about reaching the last mile. I think I would like to speak on the last meter, right from the monitor on to making sure that the language barrier is removed and the user is able to use it in the language that is comfortable with. I started my career way back in 1992 ensuring that people have access to learn how to type shala and having a cultural game with the Ravan and the Ram on one side. But more than that, I think today's requirements might be even more challenging because as we get into federal system, more and more language challenges whether we could really afford it, where multiple federal governments one might want to compute in their own language. And also the issue of whether computers are made for the language or the language has to adopt the way a computer works. And I think that's something, some of the challenges that we face today. Second, I think is to have a friction-free adoption of technology to make sure that people have access. We looked at, with Manohar way back, looked at the telecenter movement in the country, making sure that people have access to computing power and making sure that they have access to devices to consume and as well as to generate content at the grassroots level, providing voice to the voiceless and creating those citizens. Today, over a number of years, we've seen this explosion of mobile devices happening. We never thought that there would be 78% of the population that we would make this fast. 52,000 SIM cards, 53,000 SIM cards being sold every day. I think this was something that really was revolutionary. I think next is also to see what the next thing might be, to see how do we empower, have digitally literate. If you look at, I mean, some of the statistics that you've given, Ravi, and also Binay has given, the statistics of mobile telephone penetration versus internet penetration, huge gap. And 4% of households owning a computer, extremely huge digital divide there. And I think that could be because of digital literacy skills. A phone is easy, the content is voice. I hear someone's voice in my own language that I can on the other side. Whereas with a computer, there's a lot of technology in between. Television is even more easier to access the content. So we have this complicated device with the operating system and a lot of software and apps and sites and all of that have made access to content even more complicated and difficult. So we need to have digital literacy skills at the grassroots level to explore this consumption of content. And I think that's one of the challenges that we have. Next, I think, is also to find the entrepreneurship model where people can monetize content and have whether on a social cause or on a purely business model to be able to literally, as Binay said, to have to make content a business, a viable, sustainable business. And I think, which has been said, but I would just like to repeat it as my 5th point, is to mobilize the community. And I work with the youth today to mobilize the community as all of the students that's vibrant, being able to create content, being able to create innovative solutions to not only create content but also to consume content, to have Web 1.0, 2.0, to be able to provide relevant contextual meaning to the content, to the environment that they live in. And I think that's really exciting to see how we could mobilize these communities to be able to make it more relevant to the societies that they live in. And that's what social media is all about. Thank you.
Thank you, Allan. And as like it's investing upon the human capacity, identifying the human resources and mobilizing the youth. I guess that's one of the things that we can move on ahead with. So let me come to Manohar sir. And Manohar sir, coming from a policy background, from starting, as a person who has been a proponent of propagating ICT into the so not only social development, other development from the government side, can we have your perspective? What could be the 5 prominent things which could enable the local internet content?
Great, thank you, Hempal. I think I would like to think more in terms of elements of content ecosystem. So first and foremost, I think it's been touched upon by Binay. Infrastructure is the key. So I think from the policy perspective as well, we have to look at the connectivity. Of course, it is on the rise, but then again, as we have seen through strategies, we are not there as yet. So connectivity, and the other thing is when you talk about content that generates value, creates value, when you talk about content that the communities can relate to and take benefit out of, I think these contents are usually bandwidth hungry contents. So I think the other thing that you need to we need to focus on is, of course, availability of broadband. If you are trying to get meaningful content to the community, especially when it comes to delivering content in the health services area, telemedicine and the like, and even distance education, things like that. So bandwidth will be another key element of this infrastructure, and there are factors relating to affordability and reach and whatnot. We can touch upon this as we go along. And that's one element. The other thing is we need to have a mechanism for fostering content development per se, and that would include innovation, and especially with regards to penetration of mobile phone. We have seen that mobile is more and more becoming a device of choice for the masses. I think we'll soon, at this speed, will soon be nearing in a few months 80% penetration. And also the adoption of so-called smart devices is also on the rise. We are not there as yet. So I think that would call for approach that would drive innovation. Of course, with this platform, and also there was talk about making use of social media to create more value to the communities and help it generate more local content. So innovation is one. The other is, as Allan also touched upon, is investment or some kind of mechanism for incentivizing content creation. There has to be some kind of business model that has to be there. Otherwise, I think it will not be sustainable. So I think we have to come up with a mechanism of incentivizing content creation. And third is, of course, the engagement with content creator, with the community, especially the content creator. There was talk about the mindset issues and things like that. So I think the social organizations like AIS should have a mechanism whereby they engage with the content creator. There are, I think, as we speak, Nepal is slowly becoming a vibrant. We're beginning to see the emergence of a vibrant community when it comes to creating content in Nepali. And in other languages. In other languages, we're not there as yet. Of course, there are Wikipedia and 5 languages, but I think this is still a work in progress. So I think there needs to be some kind of engagement with content creator, and there also needs to be some kind of engagement with the communities, the consumers. So I think you also have to reach out to the consumers. I think for the sake of being within the time, I will not detail out what I mean there, but then again, I think there's a need to for this engagement with the communities, with the consumers of content. And lastly, of course, it needs to be tied up with the ongoing e-government initiative, because we do have a sizable e-government initiative that's currently underway, but I think in terms of working out the channels of delivery and making sure that the services that will ultimately roll out, released to the masses, I think there needs to be some kind of discussions there as well. So these are the few points that I want to make.
Thank you, Manohar sir. Maybe in the part we will be talking about what would the mechanism for developing local content, maybe some ideas that we would like to really ponder upon. So moving on to the second aspect that we want to really have a brief discussion We definitely know the local internet content is important. We have a generic understanding that it is very crucial for the development of internet, the development of society, the development of the nation. But is there any other different prospects which for enabling the local internet content in case of Nepal? Is there any other perspective? So can I start with Binay?
That's one way to look at it, but the other way I would look at it is why reinvent the wheel? I mean, there are Facebooks, there's Google Plus, and all those things. Platforms are already there, platforms are already developed. And local community, local people here, local entrepreneurs can hook on to that platform, to those platforms, and make their content. So for us ISPs or hosting service providers, I think the most important thing for us is to provide quality service that does not go down, service that has low latencies, service that gives a perception of good quality, a video that does not buffer, those sort of things. So, for example, what we've done is like Google servers, YouTube. Anybody can generate YouTube content, upload videos and all that. We please do that all the time. So, what we do is, and what we have to understand is, local people would like to see videos made by the local people also. So our idea was to get the local Google content here in Nepal, in Kathmandu, hosted in servers here, so that the latency issue is not there, the buffering doesn't happen. And that has been one very successful thing that's happened in the last few years. The consumers have really loved it, that the latencies are not there. So that's one example of how not video on platform. There are platforms, multinational billion-dollar companies, they do very well what they do. And then our job is to latch on to that and try to see what entrepreneurial ventures we can make out of it, social or whatever. So quality issue is one thing that help in terms of user experience. So the other thing I would like to also touch upon is, for example, when we, I'm sure we still do, we use desktop computing. It takes 5 minutes to boot. It used to be like that. It was a cumbersome box, and then boot up time is so much, and all those things were there. It crashes, and installing is another headache. Installing software and all those things. But now we see, 2-year-old kid can, give him a tablet computer. Tablet is, what do you call that? Tablets. Smartphone, OS of Android or iOS. So easy. The interface is so easy out there. It's visual. It's touch. So the barrier about trying to, that technological barrier that was there doesn't exist. So I mean that would help with the internet, more rural. It could help with anybody for that matter. So even the language barrier is now more visual in that sense. So that's another revolution that's going on, that's ongoing, and how we consume data or how we consume information, applications is also changing. So how content is going to be made, that's the key is in the mobile devices. And the other thing I'd like to also touch is the business model. If for business model to come up, from our perspective, from our Nepal Internet Exchange perspective, we'd like to see a lot of local content, local uses, so that our international bandwidth doesn't get used. International bandwidth, though it's getting cheaper, still very expensive. So that was one of the things one of the speaker Subir also mentioned, bandwidth being expensive. So I would say more local content means more profits for ISPs, more user experience, more viable content, something that is in the local context useful for users, that will only grow consumer base. That is another area I think would issue.
We'll come back to Binay sir once again on a few other things to discuss. But focusing on the prospects, what could be the prospects which this local content could enable? So that's what we are trying to focus on. Maybe I can come back to Ravi once again. Maybe just following up the So different perspective of enabling these local content.
Yeah, we talk a lot about local content. What do we mean by local content? I think that's something that one of the keynote speakers was about. What is local content we're talking about? Is it something a 5-year-old is taking photographs and uploading to the YouTube? Is that the local content we're looking for? Is it content that's related to education that is prepared by teachers, or is it something that farmers can use that someone's preparing and sharing with the farmers? Because actually someone actually talking to the farmers and finding out what are the local technologies they're using, what are the local knowledge, and sharing that. I mean, so let's be clear on that. I think when I talk about local content, I'm going beyond just taking photographs and writing a few things and then uploading YouTube and sharing in social media. Now I'm talking about content that is actually sought and that can be useful in the context of development, in the context of health care, in the context of education, and that's what I'm going to limit my discussions on. I'm very shocked, surprises would be my word, shocked to see that we do not have one or two of the key people working on local content here in Nepal, in Nepali Wikipedia. I have some friends I can see they're sitting in the back there, Ganeshi and Saroji, who have been doing phenomenal work, pushing Nepali Wikipedia. Now, why is that important? We thought one aspect is making content on the internet reachable to the mass. The majority of Nepali population still do not speak English or can read English. For them, it's very important. Second, we talk about preservation of culture and language. That's another aspect. And that's where you can actually engage a lot of people from different backgrounds. It can be now that once more and more connectivity reaches to rural areas, you can have students in Jumla writing about what kind of wildlife they can find in Jumla. What are the kind of what is lifestyle in Jumla. So those are the things we can push on that. Those are the kind of information that are very useful for researchers, for development workers, and for journal readers. So I think we need to look at that aspect. And also, like Binay said, there are many platforms that are already available, and also adapting what is available. So when we talk about the local content, what is useful for local people, maybe we don't have to create it. One of the speakers earlier talked about the plethora of materials available on the internet. But now, why is it that it's not reaching the people who can use it? So let's address that. Infrastructure is one, but the other thing is also make it contextualizing a little bit. Maybe there can be an effort from the crowd to translate some of the videos from Khan Academy that can be used, and then delivering and then passing on that to users. So language is always kind of a very I don't know. It's a difficult issue. We work in many schools in rural areas, and then we prepare a lot of the education content in Nepali because we think that's what's easier. But when we go to the schools, the parents say, we want our kids to learn English because they think that English would give them a leg up to succeed in life. So, we have to look at it and many schools are trying to be English speaking schools. That's also big in Nepal. So, in language, we still, there's one aspect of preserving language, but also helping kids learn in the language, maybe they'll use in the future. So, let's go beyond just the entertainment aspect of using local content and go actually of what is applicable in healthcare, in development, in education, and in community building.
Thank you, Ravi. So moving on to Allan. So what prospects you see when we have this rich internet content for Nepali society?
Thank you for passing Osama and passing it on. I wanted to pick up on the thread that Ravi was talking about, language. I mean, we've looked at, this is the 5th version of the Windows operating system that I've been working in Nepali language. And every time, even in the rural telecenters, we've placed about 1,280 computers in various schools and youth centers, Ama Samua, in the rural areas, and thought that making, just giving access to computers would solve the problem. But that really doesn't happen. Every time, 6 months later, we go back to the same telecenter, and we say that they remove the Nepali language and gone back to English, primarily because they feel that they have to go abroad to work, and English is an important skill language for them to have. So I think this language thing, we thought when we did Windows XP in Nepali language way back, we thought we would create a revolution. Once the language barrier is removed, everyone would be accessing computers. Never happened. We see a lot of youth educated in the so-called English medium schools, and they look at the Nepali operating system and they say, hey, insert is called Osama, laugh at it. And then even if we replaced Osama with Firaun, they would still laugh at it. And then that would be the end of local language computing. whatever word that we use is still insert, and whatever context that they can think about. Talking about another anecdote. My office is in New Road, and in the corner of my office there is a cyber cafe, prime, one of the most expensive properties in Kathmandu. He's occupied the whole building, and he operates about 3-4 months a year. And in those 3-4 months, he kind of even advertises on prime time television at the time. And what is his killer app during those 3-4 months of business? DV visa. And literally lakhs of Nepalese fill up that diversity visa for the US, trying to go to the land of the dreams. And that seems to be the biggest killer app. And I believe the Postal Services Department has created literally thousands of telecenters in the rural areas, placing access to content, and that content seems to be their visa. And I think the crucial crux seems to be if the government services were available. One time we used to see lines of people standing from 4 o'clock in the morning just for e-passport. And yet it would be so simple to convert that as a service to the citizens.
From the perspective of localization and user content, what other prospects that you can see?
I think the challenge now is we can't just limit it with one language as Nepal. That's very dangerous now, especially with the political changes that were coming. And that's going to be such a big cost for Nepal when we have to look at. For the last 10 years, I have been working with my own mother tongue, Nepal Bhasa, Nepali. I'm trying to see if I can create ISO standards for Nepal Bhasa as well, as I had influence for the 10646 standards for Devanagari to make it usable in Nepali as well. But there are such huge challenges with other languages as well. The statistics was 120 languages in Nepal. Every 10 kilometers out, the accent would change. As a Nepali speaker Nepal Bhasa speaker from Kathmandu, as I move to Patan, 10 kilometers out, I don't understand the language they speak. If I move further out to Bhattarai, furthermore, I don't understand the language they speak. And that's the diversity that we have. And thus plus, I think now it's becoming more to be a political issue that the politicians have really exaggerated, that Nepali cannot solve all the localization problems. So we also need to, at the same time, look at globalization of the content, especially in terms of language. And this is a very hot political issue that we have. We're in this transition where I think people could be speaking from their hearts when they come to language. And I've seen that happen a lot.
It has happened that in case of Nepal also, in Nepali we have 70,000 articles, in case of Nepali we have 25,000 articles. In case of Maithili, Pali and Sanskrit, we have in range of 2,500 and 1,500 articles, which is like, the 5 Wikipedias which are available in Nepali spoken language which is spoken in Nepal. Well, one of the prospects that could be is, maybe easy transition of knowledge in these languages, which could be a possibility. So definitely. Moving on to Osama. So what other prospects do you see could be possible of having this rich local internet content?
Listen, one thing that I don't know whether we all of us understand or not, the understanding of internet and web as a medium, which is the only medium which is a permanent medium. It's very important for us to digest this. All other medium is a dead medium with time. Morning newspaper comes, by evening it is dead. TV, whatever you see in moments of the time, it is dead. It's no more exists there. In the radio, it doesn't exist there. And gradually what is going to happen is that any country is going to be recognized as how much content related to their country is available to be searched, available to be found, available to be referred. And that's how that will decide whether you exist or you are relevant or not relevant. I think this is extremely important for us to understand, all of us, all the Asian countries, South Asian countries. It's very, very important to understand. And therefore, we need to hit hard where there is a content available but not available on the net. We are producing but not replicating. So that itself is such a huge task. and so easy to achieve than thinking that each and every one of us will also create content. So for example, all the newspapers, are they on the web or not? All the radio stations, are they, their channels can be on YouTube also? Are they on YouTube? Are they available on internet? That huge amount of content they are creating every day. They are broadcasting either 24 hours or 20 hours or 18 hours or 10 hours. Where are those content going? Are they available to be searched all the time or referred all the time in other in the web medium or not? So my suggestion and the understanding is that we need to understand the intensity of the permanency of this medium, which is web, and therefore find out all the channels and all the available content, that how we can replicate it on the internet. That should be the first task.
Yeah, there has been a few initiatives in Nepal as well, putting on the music industry on the web. Well, lots of things has to still to be done, because that is not really picking up. I guess you could have some answers on that as well. So moving on to Manohar sir, what other prospects do you see of having a rich local content on the internet?
Right. I think the question is as to what are the key imperatives regarding the local content development. And one I think that comes to my mind is why do this? Is to expand access to knowledge and enabling communities to leverage IT for value creation. I think the key word there should be value creation, as Ravi has also touched upon this level. Of course, there's entertainment aspect to content, and it also has value. But then again, at the end of the day, we are interested in enabling expanding access to knowledge resources to the communities, and through that, enabling them to create value. And the other thing is, of course, we talk about inclusion, participation all the time, but I think there's a lot of scope for innovation in the information technology space, especially the content space, with regards to developing mechanism of ensuring inclusion and participation. So that's local content, I think, content that's tailored to the specific need of the communities, that's rooted to our ground realities, could be a means of ensuring inclusion and participation, and also giving voice to the voiceless. And third, I think is a way of ensuring empowerment of the communities. So access to information, access to knowledge, and access to, and being able to put forth your ideas and whatnot. I think these things empower communities. So I think third imperative is empowering communities. And fourth is, of course, as we have seen, and there was also mention about as to why there is a lot of scope for ICT adoption, especially at the small and medium enterprise level, and there's a lot of scope for mainstreaming ICTs in productive economic activities, and it doesn't have to be a big corporate setup. I think the ICTs can be used, in-house communication technology can be used, even in small, even micro enterprises, for example. So I think that would be another imperative for going into driving innovation around local content development. That would be guided primarily by the fact of by the imperative to help position knowledge and information as factors of production, if you will, even in the rural areas, and that's happening. I mean, we don't have time there to share my experience in that regard, but I have come across few instances where they have been able to deliver information technology very effectively, especially in Chitwan. And that's another imperative. And also, fourth is, of course, the preservation of cultural heritage. And it was also pointed out in previous presentation in the morning that it's an excellent means of capturing or recording cultural heritage and ensuring that it stays there for the for the generations to come. So I think these are the key prospects or importance.
Yeah, as Ravi has also highlighted this on the preservation of culture, the cultural language and the lifestyle. So definitely yes. So just moving on, since we are a little bit overshooting our the time that we have planned for, maybe we want to just have an open-ended question on what are the challenges or could be the future challenge that is we need to address so that we could have a rich resource pool for local content and knowledge commons. So,
Yeah, okay. I think we have already touched on a few of the challenges that I see going forward. Of course, one,
maybe
I
one
don't want to repeat that, but then again, infrastructure would be the key, especially broadband would be the key. Come up with what they call killer content, killer applications and all that. And especially if you want to if you want to really bring about transformation through ICTs, I think you have to have a robust infrastructure in place, and that should be, that should be accessible to all. And the other challenge that I see going forward is keeping pace with emerging technology paradigms. Of course, we've spoken about mobile and smart devices. So I think we also need to factor in the great amount of resourcefulness offered by this cloud computing. I think I think to a certain extent it's overhyped, but then again there are real benefits to be had from moving into cloud and as it provides scalability.
and in particular with the policy things that these challenges or the future challenges which you could face upon. And
from a policy perspective, I think I would argue for, of course, and I'll be preoccupied with this initiative that is currently underway, even though there are so many critics, especially in the e-government space. So the fact remains that the government is spending a sizable amount of money in trying to modernize government machinery and promote e-government. And from the policy perspective, it's really important for the government actors to see that the services that we offer through these platforms are accessible to all and are packaged in a such way that it can be appropriated by the communities, it's tailored to their specific needs, cultural nuances, linguistic variations and all that. That's one point that needs to be taken up from the policy perspective. The other is we must come up with this is again from policy perspective, we must come up with a mechanism for driving innovation and especially engagement with the youth, and so that and creation of content is at times not easy. Now more and more an app is a content, so I think there's a lot of innovation in the room for innovation in that, and I think the innovation ecosystem should be in place. And as I mentioned, the localization and contextualization of the content, there should be a specific, some focused initiative with regards to that. And lastly, I think Binay also has touched upon this. We have to reduce our reliance on international bandwidth because it's first it has postal applications, and and so I think NPIXP is one thing that needs to be strengthened as an infrastructure for promoting local content. And of course, we can go on and we can also talk about the role of open source in that market. I will limit when it comes to this because. Yeah.
so, Allan J, let me come to you on this one. Talking about just copyrights has been one of the very fundamental thing which had been posing challenges for the reuse and recreation or dissemination of the content. What's your take on this?
I think we had a couple of keynote speakers also talk about this, but I think we need to look at saying how do we incentivize, how do we help assist the content creator to monetize. So there's got to be some incentive for people to, whether it's crowdsourcing, whether it's proprietary content, whether it is in whichever form of of the content with whichever form of copyright that they are providing, I think there's got to be some incentive. For some, it is the name that counts. For some, it's got to be monetary benefits. And then we've got to look at that model. And I think Manohar, you rightly touched upon to see whether we could literally look at, I think what at one point we had this grassroots content creating project that we worked together in Hempal, where we talked about digital dividends. That dividend has to be provided. So as the digital content keeps on coming up, how do we make sure that the grassroots content are harnessed, cataloged, and make sure that it can be reused by more people so that it can benefit other people? And I think personally, I feel the key has to be a sustainable long-term model. Otherwise, the project will die off, and then at some point, the server would also die off, and the content is lost.
Osama and Ravi, we know that government is one of the largest producer of any content in any country. So, what could be the ways, what are the challenges that government is really thinking they are facing, not coming up with this content for the consumption of the citizen? What would be the way ahead?
So I really don't know, but I think you said it already. Government itself should take initiative to make many things mandatory. Something like there is an act in Nepal also called RTI. Why don't they implement properly themselves? So that's the pressure group that has to be created. And also, I think there need to be creating some kind of mandatory things, something like when you register a NGO or an organization, you need to show an address. Can this be show an address of the website? Must be. You need to have a website as a mandatory thing. Why not? That will also encourage, at least at institutional level, to have a presence to show what you are doing, where is your address. And especially because your .np is free, then what are you really running away from? If the domain is free, you just need a page or some website to be there. So that's so making some things mandatory, that it is a must that need to be done at least at a government level, institutional level, and organization level.
Ravi, we have been working on this sector since last few years, and we have Binay, who is a proponent of RTI in Nepal. But is this that easy for us to really have the laws and the frameworks there? Is it that easy to get those contents on the forum where public or the citizens can access it? What?
Yeah. One of the things when you work, in the public sector and try to work in schools, one of the things that really frustrates me is, like Manohar said earlier, there are policies being introduced, there are master plans, e-governance master plans, ICT education master plan, ICT master plan. There are so many different things. Sometimes I don't think government officials are even aware of what master plans and policies are there. And the thing really that bugs me is, there are committees after committees after committees. So anything that has to be done has to go to the working committee, and then it gets recommended to another committee and to the steering committee, and the meeting cannot take place because the secretary is out of the country and somebody's out. So I think we need to get over this. The whole idea of using ICT is to facilitate service to the people. And we talk about telecenters. There are telecenters, as Allan has worked on it a lot. And I remember about 4 or 5 years ago, one telecenter operator from Panalti was in an interaction program, and he said, "I'm probably the one of the 2 telecenters that are still working out of the 39 that was set up by SSCIT." And he said, "I see they face many problems because when people come to my telecenter for service, I let them fill out their passport application form at my telecenter, and they print it and take it to the Jilla Prasasan, the city office, and they reject it. They say, we don't accept it. Why? Because there's someone who's making 15 rupees out of that form. So there's a lot of these bureaucratic hurdles. Some keynote speakers talk about promoting transparency through ICT and user technology. Yes, it does promote transparency, but that also is a reason for many of these offices and offices not to use ICT. They're afraid that ICT is going to expose many things and not take the control out of them, because that's the last sort of power, is to hold on to this process that anyone who has to make a passport has to go through me. They're very reluctant to let go of that. That mindset has to change. So I believe that a lot of the mindset change will come with the new generation who understand the power of technology, power of content, power of connectivity. And I hope that will come eventually. But until then, so we can set up all the websites we want. The district education office, some of the keynote speakers talk about challenges in India. I mean, the challenge in Nepal is nothing compared to India. So the scale in Nepal is so small, it's manageable, we can do it. The mindset, if we can bring that change. We only have 75 district education offices. So if we can bring change in those 75 district education offices, we can do a lot. They already have a template for websites, and they have it, but nobody updates it. Nobody provides service to it. Just having a website is not going to help. And the customers have to be aware of it. What are my rights? What are my... So one example also I'd like to give is this year the government has allocated 1 billion rupees to put computers in schools. In all high schools in Nepal, that's around 8,000 schools. So 5 computers, every school, they will get 1,40,000 rupees, 40,000 rupees from the government. School has to come up with 60,000 rupees. Yet the schools do not know this. Schools do not know that. And I just came back from Manzar, and the schools have no idea. And there are few government officials who actually try to use this, saying, well, I can put computers in the schools if you do so and so. So these kind of right information and awareness, we have to push on that so that this kind of transformation, change through technology can come on the demand from the grassroots.
So thank you, Ravi, and we have like a series of questions coming to our panelists. But to take on from what Ravi has already said, Manohar sir, is there some kind of cultural difficulties of putting up this content, or there is something like what exactly? Because we have been demanding the departments and the government institutions which contents are not very which are okay to be released to the public. What is the issue?
No, for one, Hempal, I cannot speak for the government because I don't represent the government now. But then again, my experience tells me that, of course, there are some cultural issues, and we have to face it. It's still a very deeply entrenched bureaucracy, very traditional at times. But then again, having said that, we are also seeing the emergence of young and energetic officers who are more receptive to the idea of leveraging technology to provide services and to bring in transparency. So over the years, I think the situation will change. But right now, I must say that now I can speak as a free citizen. I think there are some deep-rooted cultural issues. So whenever you're talking about bringing about transformation through ICTs and embedding ICTs into the workings of the government machinery, I think one thing that you have to focus more intently on is change management, changing the attitude, changing the mindsets of powers that we, bureaucratic heads and whatnot. But so there are some cultural issues there when it comes to fully leveraging IT. For example, especially in terms of data sharing, information sharing, it is so difficult to get it done. There's always this talk about transparency and whatnot, but there seems to be a scant realization that ICT can be a formidable tool to achieve that, to drive transparency, to reduce corruption and all that. So there are some deeply entrenched systemic structural issues there.
Okay, sir, Manohar sir, we have few questions for you as well coming up. Chandrabhaddha Bhuttelji asking, where is it most necessary for local content to go through? How can we initiate for this issue? Coming up second, how do you think government should move forward with respect to content deploying computers in 7,000 schools in Nepal? That is there. And I am informed that we will have some government representatives who will be taking on some of the issues, addressing some of the concerns which has been raised here after this panel is over. So that's there. And the final one is from Venki. Did the policymaker in Nepal believe in creating a content heaven? It's a question mark. So that's there. So would you like to take on this question in a? So basically, awareness is necessary for local content to go through. How can we initiate this issue? Basically, this is the one for you, and that is also for Ravi. And did the policymaker in Nepal believe in creating a content habit? That's a question mark for. And how do you think the government should move forward with respect to content deployment computers in 7,000 schools? That's in this year's budget for Nepal government.
So I think when I was touching upon the elements of content ecosystem, two of the points that I was trying to make was the engagement with content creator and also the consumers. So the idea being to raise the level of awareness. Of course, forums like this help, but then again, I think it will help only to a certain extent. So we have to have a mechanism whereby we can go to the communities and maybe we can localize this event. We're going to start it from localizing this kind of event. Maybe have it in the districts or rural areas, whatnot. So I think it's doable because in terms of connectivity, also I think there's interesting things happening. It's on the rise. So that's what needs to be done. The other point that I was trying to make when I was listing down the elements of content ecosystem is I mentioned briefly about innovation, driving innovation, engaging especially with the youth and the local level change agents and working in the communities, whatnot. So we have to have some kind of mechanism of working with them and coming up with innovative ideas for content creation. And third is also, I think we have to engage with with people in the media. I think they also have a very important role to play when it comes to creating content, local content, and expanding on the possibilities that are there in terms of content creation. So I think these are some of the areas that needs to be looked at.
I guess we are moving on to the final question as well, also with this invitation, basically some action items. But before that, I would like to take on one question from Saroj Bahal, and that is for Binay Bohara sir. Like AIS is one of the biggest.
Before we move, I think there's a question there with regards to the recently announced
7,000
initiative, 7,000 schools. I think Ravi is the best person
Yeah,
to
I'm coming to him after that as well. So that's that. So let me put on to Binay sir. ISP is the biggest beneficiary of the local content expand. What are they doing to promote it? Is there anything that is coming up from ISP in the situation or something like that? That's a very
Like I said before also, our interest is to give the best quality of service experience. Try to get information as close to them, as close to the consumer as possible, be it in Kathmandu or going regional, in other places of Nepal also. So that's an incentive for us also. There's a dual, we increase our customer base and then we reduce our dependence on international bandwidth. So that is one thing. The other thing, of course, is no matter how hard we try, that I missed out last time, was the regulators. They're sitting on a pile of money here. I think close to $100 million, which was the fund, what you call the USO fund in India, and here we call the RTDF. And that money's been lying out there. We thought that Nepal was a poor country, we don't have the money, but that's not the case. There's $100 million right there. Big pile. And then nobody's doing anything about it. They just talk about it, they make plans, they talk about joining the district headquarters on optical fiber network so that the backbone is there, the information highway is there, but it's not happening. If those kind of things come up, that's the kind of pressure we also need to enforce from the regulators and the government, that then only we would see more interaction in terms of getting the connectivity there, more dynamism built in terms of getting the content out, the digitization thing he was talking, Osama was talking about, and he also emphasized that, that makes sense. If there's the digitization in the sense, maybe it's only in your computer, maybe it's in your island of networks, but not out there on the internet. I think that is the key point that I also learned today in this discussion. And I could have a Windows, whatever, 91, whatever is the version right now, or the Word 8, is it Word 8, no? And 50 years down the line, how am I going to access my work? Because I was listening to one of these, Ravi also told about Manzar. He did mention about how all these versions are going to, keep on upgrading, and you're left with your old version, and 50 years down the line, nobody can access those information. So digitizing, that is one thing, but then putting it online also sort of keeps there for forever. So that's one thing I know.
Okay, so basically taking on that, like we have a huge fund. Can it not be, way demand could be created so that ISP association could initiate some kind of ways where the content is being, like there are lots of actors who are definitely working on it, and creating a demand from the bottom up that could again create the infrastructure, and obviously on the other sector of content as well.
Actually, I'm encouraged because right now what we see is in terms of technology, the simplicity is there. It's coming interface. We talk about interface. We talk about complexities being on the cloud, and the devices are simple and easy to use and cheap. You have the Chinese version, which is available for 6,000 rupees onwards, or whatever. So the key ingredients are coming up. The ecosystem is being built, and based upon that, what is the only thing that is lacking is the connectivity part, which I see is where the government needs to come in and tackle that. Because ISPs alone or the telecoms alone will not be able to do it. Because it is a national initiative. We all know the government officials, they go out abroad, they make big commitments in the international forums, the ITUs and whatnot, that by so and so year we have so much broadband penetration and all that. And by the time they come out of the junket and get back here to town, they all forget that. It's just words. So somebody needs to walk the talk.
So coming back to the question that Manohar sir has passed on to Ravi, and I would say maybe Allan also, about what do you think that the government should move forward with respect to content deploying computers in 7,000 schools in this financial year also?
Putting computers in school is easy. Let's use disperse the money to the district education offices. Number of schools in the district is all in the database, and you just send the money, and the district education office will tell the schools come and get the money, and that's it. So some schools will buy the computer, some schools will just reuse the computers they already have and tell the district education office that we bought the computers with the schools, and with the money, that's going to happen. The challenge is how do you use this technology, computers, resources that are available right there at the school to bring change in this particular case in education. So I think many speakers have touched upon this, human capacity development, building that, among the teachers. We work in training teachers. It's not going to change. Just training the teachers are not going to change. Community awareness, so that community can demand that the teachers now have this training, that they let the children learn using the new resources that are available in there. Building schools is easy. To make sure that there's proper teaching, learning happening in the school is a challenging part. So the government has to, the Ministry of Education has to think of that, and not just put it aside and say we've spent our money, we've done our job. The job is to make sure that the resources are used properly. There's no plan currently to do that, and that's what we've been pushing. Don't just put computers in schools, it'll be a waste of money. Some of the schools will probably not even be able to use it, and it will be locked, or maybe for administrative use, the computers will be used. So that is the challenging part, and that needs to be addressed. And plans have to be sort of worked out in order for schools to have that kind of access and use the resources properly.
I think before I touch on that, I just wanted to mention or even highlight the fact that the Rural Telecom Development Fund is the people's money. It's not the government's budget. All of us, in every phone call that we make, every internet subscription that we have been paying that money. And that money cannot sit in a bank, but has to go to the people. And I think the more that we can mobilize that, the faster that we can use. Otherwise, it's an opportunity lost. And like Osama was saying, one generation would have lost that opportunity. And there could be a multiplying factor, a ripple effect, when the money is invested in the right manner. So I just wanted to highlight that. To move on, I think in the education sector, we need to see how teachers needs to be empowered. Because we can't replace a teacher with a computer. Eventually, I think it's more learning that's happening, and I think we need to see how technology can be used in classrooms. If you look at some of the expensive schools, for 10, 12 years, what do they teach? They show the computer lab so that they can charge expensive fees to the students, but they still teach for 10, 12 years Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, Microsoft PowerPoint, Windows operating system, maybe a little bit of database in the way. And I don't think that we give a computer or a tablet to, like Binay was saying, even to a 4 or 5-year-old child, in a couple of minutes, if not hours, he'll figure out what to do. There was a project to find out, and the hole in the wall project where a computer was placed for these 3 children of Mumbai. And very soon, these children that have never had any formal education could figure out which site to go to listen to Bollywood songs and dance to the song. So using computers today is the easy part. The devices are getting simpler, it's getting intuitive, we can learn it very fast. But I think the challenge is still, I think what the noble work that Ravi has been doing is to make sure that we provide sciences, maths, English, geography, and the subject with using technology in the classroom. And I think that that's very key, that we use technology to teach the subjects that they need to learn, not teach them how to use it. And then that's the easy part, I think. So the focus, I think we should go there. And also to see, I think bottom line would still be, how do we empower teachers? They are the elements of change. They are the people that can make a difference.
Can I quickly address a couple of issues there? Allan rightfully said it's not about teaching kids how to use Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint. First of all, with the amount of money that's going to the schools, it's not even enough to buy Microsoft operating Windows, because the budget is 25,000 rupees per computer, and I'm sure you wouldn't like the schools. 7,000 schools using pirated software. That's another point that I've been trying to tell the government, is we cannot promote the use of pirated software in our schools like this, openly. And
Very much
the answer that we get from the government is, well, we don't specify anything, we'll just send the money, the schools will do whatever they want to. So this standardization is very important. So we earlier talked about there are many resources in open source that are available that we should actually address and we should actually look into. So that's also very important. Empowering teachers sounds really good when we say it. It looks awesome when you write on our grant proposal saying we're empowering teachers. There are and let's face it, I'm sure there are some few good teachers around as well. But one of the biggest hurdles we face are also teachers. So there's many challenges. One of the biggest challenges we face in education, public education, is teachers. 80% of our annual education budget, which is in the tune of about 80 billion rupees this year, 80% of that goes to pay salaries. In any private company, if you're paying 80% of your budget to a group of people and if they don't deliver, what do? You fire them, you get new people. There have been trainings after trainings for government teachers. You go to a school and ask how many trainings the teachers have had. The problem is nobody's delivering from that training to the schools. Schools send teachers to training, so there's a whole list of UNICEF training, UNESCO training, old age training, government training, but they're not delivering. There are political interest groups there. There are many other issues. So empowering teachers sounds great, but I think in the digital age, we're going to move a little bit away from it. I'm not talking about replacing teachers with computers and digital learning materials, not replacing. We're going to enable them to become better teachers, but let's face it, there are many teachers, we've gone to training, they just said, we don't want to learn this. And nobody, even head teacher cannot tell them, no, you have to go to this training of that. Nobody can tell them because teachers are so powerful, they're backed by unions. So nobody can actually do anything. In those cases, let's make those materials and resources available directly to learners. So the success of MOOC, massive open and open courses that are available, online courses, the power of it is that it's access. The learners, independent learners can access it. There are content available. So if you can do similar things here, making those content, making them available to teach students, many students fail from public schools because they don't have teachers in English and science and math. Let's face it, you go to government schools in rural areas, they don't have it. So let's make those content and make it free. I think that unless and until we make content free, we will still have a huge disparity. Parents who can pay for those, especially in rural, urban areas and private schools, those kids can go ahead with all the content that's available there. We have to make sure that, well, of course, I'm not saying there should be a business model. There can be a business model with geared towards service, but the success of MOOC, the success of Khan Academy, the success of many of these things, if you look online, is because it's freely available to interested learners, and that's the kind of model that we should look. And then help those teachers who are interested become better facilitators in the learning, because many of the children, like you, not just children, even adults, we learn a lot of things on our own. We look for the knowledge, we look for information, we interact with friends, we ask questions, we learn. And that's the kind of learning that can be promoted through the use of technology and with facilitation from teachers and other community members.
Coming back to Manohar sir and Osama, like what could be the ways we could motivate the teachers, or what Ravi has already right now identified? Is there ways, or is it only the technology or the human in a policy perspective or in a social perspective?
I think that's a very difficult question, because how do you motivate teachers? Of course, there could be so many factors at play, and I think if we get into this discussion can go on. There's so much politics and and things like that. So I think it has to do with some systemic issues with the education system in Nepal. So I think it can be a protected discussion. But having said that, one of the starting points maybe could be the training institutions or even the universities where train teachers. So maybe that could be a viable entry point for orienting teachers towards ICT-enabled education, both as a pedagogy tool and also as a tool for accessing knowledge for the students and all that, and improving the school system and all that. So I think so. One of the entry points could be for example, we have educational outfits here that specialize in training teachers. So maybe maybe there's a need to engage with them.
Osama, one of the things that you have already said also in the building of the community and identifying the challenges, the pioneers who could be taking on the change, maybe something change from the grassroots, which would ultimately motivate or force the teachers who will be teaching to really go on and change. Just a very brief comment on it.
Yeah, I think we are running out of ideas, so many ideas at once. One idea is that in the education, the school and the teacher, I was just thinking that there are 30,000 schools, must be multiplied with 5 to 10 teachers, maybe, something like 150,000. So 150,000 teachers. That is just a small money to give each one of them an Android phone with an application of geolocation, whether they are present in the class or not. Then it will automatically translate whether the school is running or not, or the children are coming, because teacher has to be there. But I'm sure teacher won't be going to school in many cases. It is the same thing, and it is so easy. I mean, one of Allan's kids can make the app and give the mobile. 150,000 mobile is not too much. If the government gives, there will be a responsibility that they have to just click a button as soon as they are in class and as soon as they exit. So let's see how many presents are there, and then gradually it will, get into digital inclusion in any case.
So I have some of the instructions from the organizer that we have to maybe summarize the things. Final words from all the fellow panel members. I am a little bit. I would like to apologize. I could not take on few questions here, but I just this discussion, as Manohar said, would go on if we keep on moving on. So maybe final thoughts, maybe 2 or 3 tangible. Well, we have already talked many, but to summarize it, what could be the 2 or 3 tangible action items which could really enable that Nepal is rich in the knowledge commons and the local content on the web and internet? Two or three keywords.
.NT domain, we need to exploit its power. Number two, government has to come to its senses and start building these optical fiber networks. We have to pressure, all of us in this forum has to, in some way, pressure to get that done. Without it, nothing's going to happen. That is the key. And, you know, the rest of it, all this panelists will.
Okay, I think we're repeating ourselves. But then again, I'm somehow preoccupied with the need to intensify the building of infrastructure. So that is one thing. And the other thing is, of course, I have noted that there are a few very interesting initiatives in terms of local the content development. Hempal, I think you are also involved in one of the major initiatives. So I think you are involved in Wikimedia. That to me still look like a work in progress, but I think this is very impressive the work that you have done there. I think you need to intensify that. You need to strengthen that going forward, and that would bring so much value to the overall imperatives for driving local content. And third is, of course, for forums like this, for organizations like ISOC and all. You have to engage more with the communities, user community, content creator community, and especially orient your efforts towards raising the level of awareness. And I think you have also, there is also need to show possibilities as to what can be done. I mean, this is possible. With access to internet, all of us are content creators. So I think that needs to be propagated in a meaningful way. So I think I could think of these three elements going forward.
So each online brings three more online.
I think, like you said, one would be empower the youth. We have this huge, passionate youth that we can do. And second, I think, would be to increase digital literacy, especially among the women folk in the villages. They're only the women folk left there out there now. So see how they can use content, and especially maybe Skype and other VoIP services.
I think technology is only an enabler. It's a magnifier of human commitment. So let's think of that and see how we can use technology to improve the access and the content. We talk a lot about many content that's out there, so we need an aggregator. We need someone or a group of people, government or outside, anyone, to put it all together. And I think Nepali Wikipedia group would be an excellent one. Yes, it's in Nepali, but there might be controversies, but I think if Bhojpuri also wants a Wikipedia, I think it can be easily translated from Nepali. I think chances of any content being translated or localized to another language is higher with Nepali content being there as opposed to just English.
Thank you, my panel. And I would like to just add few ones that have already been coming to session. One of the things that Allan just said was how to make the business model sustainable for enabling the content on the internet, and basically relevant content and open mind. That what Ravi said. Maybe yes, we need to open up this. That would be, and maybe some kind of cultural and behavioral change that is necessary. Relevant content, well, it changes with time, with every month passing on. Relevant content definitely changes. As Osama said, basically about how to integrate the radio and the mobile integration, which is really interesting. I don't know how it is going to be done, but maybe we have lots of participants coming from radio and FM sector, media sector. I guess we might have some wonderful discussion after this panel with Osama to interact on this, how this can be done, and if it is done, I guess internet, the local content which is available on the radio, if it is available throughout the country, it would be really a very good way to reach out to the audience. Well, taking on from Allan G, the language has to adapt to computer, or computer is for language. Well, we briefly talked about localization and the language issues that we are facing. In the previous sessions, we have already talked about some of the government institutions coming up with enforcing that all the content that is being generated is digitally compliant. So that's a wonderful, and I guess it would be really wonderful if other institutions and other departments take on lead on that and make on it. And basically, well, as Manohar said, infrastructure is key. Well, definitely yes, but again, as we know, crux might be the content. So crux for anything would be the content and mechanism for content creation from the community level and on the government level as well. So that is really wonderful. That is definitely the need of the hour. Again, coming up to the other issues as what exactly the prospects of content means, and as Ravi rightly said, what does the content means? It could be agricultural information of farmer, local content for a person who can learn about the local culture and context. That's definitely there. And basically, as we have also seen that Osama rightly said that web is the permanent media, and it is only thing that is going to be permanent. Rest we have seen the other medias which is almost exists out of its existence. The CD, the music, the cassette industry is almost out, and we can see the effect of this in Nepal as well. We now have all the folk singers whose revenue model is CRBT rather than the music cassettes, and this is definitely true in case of in case of Nepal as well. And to integrate, we have to find out way through which this local content created, maybe folk music or anything, could be integrated in a sustainable business way to ensure that they could survive, or they could be motivated to create more content on the internet to serve the audience, larger audience throughout. Definitely yes. And so empowering communities, I guess this has been the bottom line. Everything, the communities has to be empowered. Definitely yes. And finally, I guess all the other practical action items which already Binay sir, Manohar sir, and Osama and Allan has already outlined. These are wonderful. I guess with this we have definitely list of action items which we can take on, and I hope ISOC Nepal chapter, including myself, would be really keen to take on this, and with the support from other team members from ISOC and other ministries as well as departments, we hope that we will be able to have some rich content on the internet which could serve the society, Nepali society, which is created by us and for us. With this, I guess, and my apologies once again. As I have already announced that if time left, we will be able to have some face-to-face question which I'm unable to take on right now. And I would like to hand over to our host for the day, Santoshi. Thank you.